welcome to episode number 099 of Something Else. It is officially a new era. We are officially diving into the TNA era. And yes, it is total nonstop Arya for at least the next 111 or 112 weeks. But for a change, I'm not by myself. As we dive into the NWA TNA era, going through every weekly pay per view from week one, I have guilt tripped somebody to join me along for the ride. So, welcome to the Something Else Podcasting Network. Cyndi. Cyndi, how you doing today?
Can I get my video game collection back, please?
Of course. That'll be in the mail. I will send it via FedEx. So you may never get it again, but.
Oh boy. Well, guess we'll have to watch some DNA.
I guess. So welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Doing all right. Just thankful to have 2 days off in a row. I just came off working at my job 6 days, a 6 day shift for for 6 days straight because we had a mandatory Saturdays. This was supposed to be a 3 day weekend. Now it's a 2 day weekend. And watching the show, I have thoughts.
Well, that's good, and hopefully we get to hear from you in the next hour, however long this goes. Um, but yeah, so for the people who may not know you, tell people a little about you.
Well, Cindy Saddleman used to write for WrestleCrap, did some Jobbers of the Week stuff, have a couple inductions under my belt. Also wrote for Angry Marks, but I'm more well known amongst the fandom as the person who writes and owns and operates a site called Game Show Garbage, which is kind of an offshoot of WrestleCrap. Now it's just Game Show Gumbo on Twitch, on YouTube, and I stream video games, and that's essentially it.
And it's funny because in theory I should remember you from also writing for WrestleCrap and Andy Marks, but it was game show garbage that I'm like, oh my god, I love this person. I love reading what you were writing, and it's a lot of good shit. And
Thank
unless
you.
I'm mistaken, it's all still up there.
Yeah, everything is still up there, save for a couple of things that either got lost digitally or stuff I wanted to take down because I didn't think it was right.
Now, unfortunately, I do have to warn people that much like how TNA had their ring break before the start of the first show, giving them a warning that maybe this wasn't the best idea. I'm having a little bit of a weather thing on our end, and it's apparently making my internet connection a little unstable. So hopefully this thing goes off without a hitch. But in case something gets fucked up, that's why.
Well, don't worry, we could also make it look like Beware of Dog 2.
There you go. We could just pretend to be a blackout for like an hour in the middle of the event, and then one of us could throw a major hissy fit at the end.
Yeah, but I'm not Ted DiBiase, so let's just move on.
Okay, then. So let's jump into the Wayback Machine and go to a time where the WWF had just gotten the F out. WCW and ECW were no more, and a wee little company in Philadelphia named Ring of Honor had run 4 shows. Jeff and Jerry Jarrett came up with the brilliant idea to run a series of weekly pay per views, charging $9.95 a week. Originally, the plan was to do 26 tapings a year. So they do the first show live and then tape the next week's show afterwards. That lasted for this show and this show only. Um,
Oops.
yeah. Of course, most of us know the story of how TNA hired a man who was giving them horribly inflated pay per view numbers that were causing Jerry to spend way more than he could realistically afford and almost puts the company out of business within 2 months. Dixie Carter steps in and saves the company by getting her dad to buy it. And despite being on death's doorstep more than any company in the history of wrestling, in some way, shape, or fashion, it's still here more than 20 years later.
Definitely crossing the line there.
But for now, let's go on to show one because you can't get to show 110 without getting to show one. Um, your announced team. You heard two of the three in the opening: Mike Tenay, Don West, and Ed Ferrara of all people are your announcers. Now,
And
nowadays you
those
look
would be
back.
the cornerstone announcers. Like I started watching TNA. Like I saw it a couple of times in 2004,
Mhm.
but I really got into it when it was on Saturday nights on Spike
Mhm.
because it came on after a run of like I think it was American Gladiators, then Impact, and then some other stuff.
Ultimate Fighter was in there somewhere, but yeah, it was. Um, I s- I was one of those people. I was into everything wrestling related, and since I was an innocent-ish 18, 19-year-old at the time, I didn't have the ability to pirate anything, so I could only follow TNA through their website at the time. So my first exposure to actually watching it was when Impact got on Fox Sports Net originally.
So around the same time I started, 2004.
Yeah. Now, Don West, at this point, he's this legendary announcer who everyone knows, remembers, and to some degree loves. But at this point, he was a pitchman for the Shop at Home network. It included a viral video of him swimming in a sea of 3,200 baseball cards that he knocked on the floor. And I'd like to think Jerry Jarrett sat at home one night, watched that, and saw, I must have this man on my wrestling show. Um, So, one of the problems with the show, in addition to the ring breaking right before the show, because they taped the match that'll air next week, where the ring just breaks, and so they have to scramble to fix it as the live pay per view is about to start. Part of the problem was, as a new company, the production was a little iffy. It looked good for the most part, I'd say, but you had those issues where if you had a segment where more than one person would have more than one microphone, they were not bringing up the mics and bringing them down at the same time. So person B would start talking and you'd only hear the last half of what they were saying because their microphone hadn't been brought up yet. And that would go back and forth.
That was a recurring trend for TNA all throughout its time.
Oh,
It
but
was the one thing they never could get right. It smacked of WCW in massive ways because if you remember, like I'm going to get a little technical here. A lot of the times when, like, you look at your consumer grade uh, electronics and you have like a headphone jack, we'll say
Mhm.
it's silver or it's metal or something like that. In high end production, in any type of production, when you're doing live sports, the really good quality ones are gold. They're gold colored, they're bronze,
Mhm.
and you get better quality through that. Um, Even if they had used the better equipment like that, I still think it was amateur hour in many ways because the people who are running this I doubt ever did live sports in their life.
I mean, I thought Keith Mitchell was doing the production, but I mean, that could have been a later on thing. He, of course, had the run in WCW, but he is not great especially when it comes to shooting modern wrestling. When you get the cruiserweight or the X Division wrestling, he's not that great when it comes to shooting dives and things of that nature.
He's great in a studio, like when like anything after center stage, he wasn't that good.
No, or maybe he just needs hours of post production to make it look good.
Exactly.
But I guess we'll see if this error is fixed next week and next week only, because next week is pre-taped. Um, By the way, so Borash introduces Don West, who introduces Ed Ferrara. Ed Ferrara, with dreadlocks, announces he's not here for total nonstop action. He's here for tits and ass. And then sends it to the professor of vanilla, Mike Tenay. So we're already off to a rousing start, burying our lead announcer. Tenay ignores it basically and says that tonight they're going to hold a ceremony for the NWA legends. they're going to crown a new NWA World Champion in a gauntlet for the gold match, which is essentially a Royal Rumble match, but the last two would have a one-on-one match. Ferrara says the gauntlet is like real life where you have no friends. That man lives a lonely life.
Well, think about all that he's done. Like, I know we give Russo a whole bunch of crap, and justly so.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we don't give Ed enough crap.
Oh no, he definitely deserves more than his fair share, and 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 I think it helps him to some degree that first, Russo was always the person putting himself out there as this was me, all me, and also when Ed Ferrara leaves TNA in about 10 weeks, spoiler alert, this is it. Like to the best of my knowledge, he never really gets back into wrestling, and Russo pretty like he's not there the entire time, but essentially Russo's a part of the company for the first 11 years. Are you still there?
Like, when it gets bad, you know it's bad. That's the sure sign of Russo. Actually, I'll just tip my hand a little bit. Like, if you could imagine a Vince Russo booked Impact show, just your generic episode of Impact,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of lines up with what we're going to see tonight, except worse.
The sad thing is like Jerry Jarrett, like he is responsible for a lot of it, but there is definitely way too much Vince Russo influence. Um, Jeff, it's mostly, I don't want to say Jeff Jarrett's fault, but Jeff convinced his dad to, let Russo be part of the team and to give ideas. And um, I'm not, I'm not sitting here and tell you which segment was written by who, but it's very obvious that some of the worst shit is Vinny Rue's idea here. And build
Bro,
the
you just don't understand, bro. It's gonna be a fantastic experience, bro.
bro, I know, bro, but bro,
Bro.
the first segment in TNA history is a legend segment, which okay, they were gonna do a match, but the broken ring thing, so they moved some things around. So Borash introduces everybody. Harley Race is there. Dory Funk Jr., Bullet Bob Armstrong, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat comes out with the NWA title. And by the way, when they're coming out, if you are, know when to look and where to look, you can see the entire production team running away from the ring, including the Harrises, because they finally fixed the ring. Steamboat thanks everyone for watching, says it's a great honor to be the NWA champion, saying that it was the biggest and most important title he ever held in his life. He puts over, the 20 wrestlers who've been selected for the Gauntlet for the Gold and says that when we come down to two people, when it's down to the final one-on-one match, Steamboat himself will be the guest referee for that world title match. So,
Oddly enough, this is the best promo cut all night.
by Ricky Steamboat, who is not exactly known for being a great promo guy.
Right.
And then, so in my opinion, that was fine. We honored some legends. We established what the main event is. We established what's going to happen. Steamboat says, "Hey, I'm going to be the referee, so you're going to have a legend, a former champion, giving the belt to the next champion." I'd call that a win. And then Jeff Jarrett comes out to the same goddamn theme song we've been listening for the last 20 years.
Yep, a wild slapnuts appears.
I don't know who wrote this song, but it's like it could not have been the same person who wrote any of the other songs on this show because Jesus Christ. We'll get to some of them, but it's like a lot of the songs in this show suck major dicks. And Jeff Jarrett's, it's not that great, but in my opinion, it's the best of the theme songs, although that's really not saying a whole lot. But anyway, Jeff Jarrett comes out, the first active wrestler we've seen on this show, and the first thing he does is say that the main event of the show is the stupidest idea he's ever heard. Well, I guess he is a heel, right? You
And we're
know,
already off to a flying start. The company's burying itself.
yeah. Jarrett asks Dory Funk if when he won the title in 1902 was it in a battle royal. Tenay was so offended that he had to point out that Dory won it in 1969, not 1902.
67-year difference. Who cares? And by
Jackie,
the way, he didn't win in a battle royal. He won in a Cracker Jack box. He had to fight his brother Terry Funk in order to do it.
see, I thought it was the San Francisco 49er match where, Harley Race pulled out like a blow up doll or something and he found the title in the last box.
Yeah,
Um,
he actually had to pull out a photo and look disdainly at Playboy Buddy Rogers. Like,
okay. Hey, that would have made for an interesting 1969 world title match, I'm sure.
yeah.
Only would have killed multiple territories. Anyway, Jackie Fargo tells Jarrett to kiss his ass, and then he
Oh,
fucks. Yeah, and then he fucks up. He says that Jarrett is going to be in the first match, but he meant Jarrett's going to be the first entrant in the gauntlet match.
right.
Um, this brings out Ken Shamrock to a huge reaction. Now, this is like Shamrock when he left wrestling, he left the WWF in 1999 and he never came back. So this is the first time we've seen him in pro wrestling in almost 3 years. And he's a big ass star. Like, you can say what you want, but Shamrock is a pretty big star here. He comes out, he's a baby face, the crowd is into him, and he says that the gauntlet match sucks too. Okay then.
TNA, TNA, TNA.
He says Jared may beat everybody else's ass, but he won't beat him. That brings Scott Hall, who missed the entranceway because he's just wandering through the crowd. He was legitimately fired from the WWE a month earlier, so it must tell you something when they didn't even make him do a non-compete. Hall honestly wasn't 100% sure he was a babyface at first, but we figure out later that at least I think he is. But anyway, he also says that the gauntlet match is a stupid idea. So the three biggest stars in the company so far have all said that the main event that you paid $10 to watch is a dumb idea. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, aces, top marks. I know I'm jumping ahead, but they talked about Scott Hall's departure in, because the playwright from Hell.
Mm-hmm.
They actually said that it was a mutual decision that both of them part ways.
Yes, it's a mutual decision the same way all WWE firings are mutual decisions.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like we've agreed to terms on their release. The terms are we're going to release you, and then we're going to pay you for 3 months while you don't wrestle. Those are the terms. Like, okay then.
Well then,
So we go to the back
by the
where
way, you're selling short. You talked about the theme songs. You gotta admit, Marvelous Me, Scott Hall's theme, low key. It's a decent track.
it is, and it's too bad. Spoiler alert: Scott Hall's not going to be here forever. Um, so unfortunately, it's not going to stick around a whole lot longer either. But the segment just kind of ends, and Jarrett tells everyone to stick it, and Fargo will regret this day as long as he lives by making Jeff Jarrett wrestle longer. So we go to the back where a random blonde woman introduces herself as Goldilocks, and she interviews a short person named Puppet the Psycho Dwarf, who yells that we need to start the show with little people. He is offended that he is not in the little person match tonight and plans on making the other little people bleed. And we're just going to throw this out, and I wrote down a disclaimer for later, but in 2002, the accepted vernacular for the type of match that this is going to be is a midget match. That is not the accepted vernacular in 2024. However, it may slip once in a while. I apologize in advance, but just saying that was the accepted vernacular at the time.
The blonde person you talked about earlier is Goldilocks. She was a singer, actually, a legitimate singer. and she would be a vital part of the company for the first 3 years.
Oh yeah, she does a lot more than just be the backstage announcer.
Although, to be honest, I think her best work is after the weekly pay-per-view era, so we won't be discussing much about that era.
Unless we stick
Uh,
around and stick it out. But yeah, at the
no,
moment we're 110 or however many episodes, how many of these there are, and done.
right.
But then,
With, yeah,
so any thoughts on Puppet?
I hate this promo. I honestly do. I'm like, I remember watching like All American Wrestling in '93 on USA.
Mm-hmm.
Like once a month or so, they would have like the mini Macho Man against some random.
Small person.
Yeah, thank you.
It,
And even 7-year-old me was like, no,
see, when I was that young, I thought that they were actual children wrestling. Yeah.
no, that's another company in Minnesota.
Ah, up in Minnesota, don't you know?
Ah,
Um, so we finally get our first match. It is a six-man tag match, the Flying Elvis Impersonators, who are Jimmy Yang, Sonny Siaki, and Jorge Estrada in Elvis suits, versus AJ Styles, Jerry Lynn, and Low Key. So Tanay tells us these are six members of the X Division, which has nothing to do with weight limits. And I note that Jerry Jarrett must have been watching Honeymoon in Vegas because that was the movie where Nicolas Cage went skydiving in an Elvis suit. And thus, the Flying Elvis Impersonators were born.
or 3,000 miles to Graceland.
Funny, I never watched that. I did see Honeymoon in Vegas, though. So, um, I thought this was a fun match. This, it was a fast-paced match, a lot of action, and honestly, especially when you look at the rest of the card, it was easily the best choice to be the opener. Um, you know, Now they do announce. I didn't know if they announced it during the match, but it should be noted that Styles, Lynn, and Low Key are going to be three of the four people wrestling in next week's main event, which is a four-way match for the first X Division title. So with that in mind, you think you know the finish. Hey, I mean, I would think I would know the finish if I said that three of the six people are going to be in a title match next week and the other three aren't going to be. So, Cyndi, tell us what the finish was.
AJ Styles eats a bunch of pins and a bunch of finishers. I think the finish was it was Jimmy Yang hitting Yang Time off
Yep.
the top rope. It was this wonderful twisting dive onto Styles for the 1, 2, 3.
Yep. Low Key went for a running kick to Yang, but Yang moved and Low Key kicked AJ. And
No, it was Jorge Estrada that was in the corner.
oh, I wrote down Yang, but okay, it was Jorge. But so despite the clean win, none of the Flying Elvises will be entered into next week's X Division title match, nor will AJ Styles be removed. Like I said, easily the best choice for an opener, especially when you see the rest of the show. But this was one hot move after another. Lynn, I think, had more experience by himself than everybody else put together. So he, kept it all together. And by the way, they did announce next week's main event match. I do have that noted here. We did have a few blown spots, but Low Key tagged back in. I thought the fans really got into Low Key kicking with a lot of his kicks. And ultimately, Flying Elvis, like we said, win. And on a scale from 1 to 10, I gave this match a 6.5.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I think I liked it a little bit more than you did. I gave it a 7.
Nice. So one of the things that they do, especially in these first few matches, in between the matches, they show some strippers dancing in cages and then race the people in the ring out as fast as they can so they can race the next people to the ring as fast as they can. And that's what they did here as we next had the little person match, Hollywood versus Tio. And as we mentioned, the accepted terminology at the time was midget wrestling. I'm sorry, that's what it was. I didn't invent it. I'm just saying that's what it is.
I think
Um,
nowadays they call it, was it
yes.
micro wrestling? Like there was this reality show, I think it was on True TV, like 2011, 2012. Uh, that actually had, I think Tio was part of it. I think Puppet was as well, and it focused on this troupe or this company putting on shows. It was interesting to watch, but it's just not my cup of tea. I'll just say that right now. I did not care for this match.
I don't know about you, but I couldn't tell the two of them apart. And I used to tell the Bella twins apart before Nikki got a boob job.
Right.
So it tells you something. It's two white guys with blonde hair. And eventually, I only know that Tio hit the senton to win because they announced that Tio was the winner. Um, I will say the fans were into it to some degree. And in my opinion, it wasn't long enough to suck too bad. But I gave it a 1.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'll give it a 1.5 as well. Just not that good. I would also say that there was a way to differentiate. Is that Tio had the sweatband, like he was Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits.
Okay. So I don't I think Hollywood is one and done, so I don't think we're gonna see him again. But if Tio, I'm pretty sure Tio comes back. If and when he does, we'll keep that in mind.
Oh, he's around for the next 2 years.
Really, I thought
Yeah,
I thought this was
like
like a first 10-week thing was the little people, and then
no, like
hmm,
they're around for a long time. Um,
interesting.
one of my memories of watching TNA on the Fox Sports era was, remember a show called The Best Damn Sports Show Period?
Oh yeah,
In 2004, when TNA was starting to doing their Fox Sports run, they did two shows in accordance with Best Damn Sports Show Period at the Impact Zone in Universal, Florida.
I actually remember that they did a whole bunch of
And
gimmick matches. I remember.
so essentially, if you wanted to get technical on free TV, that was your first 2 hour Impact. Was these best damn shows. Like they had John Sally talk about managing three live crew instead of managing the knockouts at the time. There were only a couple of them.
Mhm.
But one of the matches was T.O. versus Puppet. They had a T.O. versus Puppet match on this show.
I
And
only
this is
remember that now because I remember what's his name, Roseanne's ex-husband, as the
Tom
referee.
Arnold.
Yes. I I just remember they did an Ultimate X match, a Six Sides of Steel match, and maybe one or two other gimmick matches. Like, and it was like taped before a pay-per-view they were having to air after a pay-per-view. So, to the crowd, they basically spoiled the entire show that was going to happen. But that's all that I remember from that. Um,
I think it was before one of the last ever weekly shows. Um, Let me just look this up because now you got me interested.
I just remember it was before a Jeff Jarrett Jeff Hardy world title match, and that could have been the last weekly pay per view. It could have also been the first monthly pay per view, because I think spoiler alert that is the main event of the last weekly pay per view and the first monthly pay per view, if I'm not mistaken.
Um, Here it is. It taped October 27th and it aired November 10th and 11th.
Okay, that was a little
So,
off. I thought it was taped like the day before the pay per view, which I think was the first Sunday in November.
Oh my god! If we ever do this for a longer period of time, we gotta find these shows.
The best damn sports show period
The
shows.
best damn wrestling event period.
Or
Because I'm gonna give you some of the matches, and honestly, some of these look great.
okay,
AJ Styles versus Alex Shelley.
that sounds like a great match.
Chris Sabin, Elix Skipper, and Sanjay Dutt in a three-way.
Random, but okay.
Christopher Daniels versus Frankie Kazarian.
SCU.
Three Life Crew. That's the best matches from night one. But there's also an America's Most Wanted match between them versus Dallas and Kid Cash.
Dallas, the future Lance Archer.
Yep. Night two. Three Life Crew versus Team Canada.
Oh boy.
It's not too bad.
No.
AJ Styles versus Abyss.
I bet that was really good. Because they had some weirdly good chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Petey Williams versus Sanjay Dutt versus Shark Boy versus Darrell Clark versus Michael Shane.
All right.
This has to deal with the football background, and it worked really well. Brian Cox, who played for the Giants, and Monty Brown versus the Naturals. And your main event of night two, Jeff Jarrett versus Jeff Hardy in a 6 Sides of Steel match.
Yep. During the Jeff Jarrett Reign of Terror, which coincided with the Triple H Reign of Terror. And suddenly you remember why people were not fans of pro wrestling in 2003, 2004.
Right.
But rewinding back to 2002, fix the tracking. By the way, we got to check the TNA Plus app. Is that what they call it nowadays? To see if those shows are on there.
How did you watch the first episode? Just question.
The TNA Plus app, if that's what it's still called.
I watched the YouTube cut. They uploaded the first episode onto YouTube, and there was spots where they broke it up, assuming to place ads or anything. Because I think this is also the episode that they have on their Fast channel, Pluto TV and stuff like that.
Oh. Yeah, probably. I know that I don't know if they ever air the weekly shows, but I know Access at least used to air old pay-per-views leading into the new Impact shows on Thursdays.
Yep.
So that's probably it too. But so then we get a fun segment. So next week is going to be a lingerie battle royal. And so Ed Ferrara and Don West, to get you prepared for that, are going to introduce you to the women in the lingerie battle royal.
Yes, Ed Ferrara. Can we talk about his fit for a second?
Of course.
He's got this feathery top with leather pants and cornrows. If you ever want to see a midlife crisis personified, you have Ed Ferrara.
You what? I was wondering, were those cornrows real? You think?
Yeah,
that is really.
They were a thing. I also have it noted here. He looks like the bastard love child of Road Dogg and the ostrich that the Ginger and Boots had sex with on Letterkenny, allegedly. Allegedly.
So they bring these women out, and first is Francine, who's wearing sky-high heels and nearly fell flat on her face. Someone named Miss Joni, who I think was once Jerry Lawler's girlfriend. Shannon, who is better known as Daphne. Alexis LeRae, who is better known as Mickey James. People named Sasha and Aaron, got no idea who the hell they are. Elektra, who was at the end of ECW. Taylor Vaughn, who was BB in the WWF. And Teresa, no idea who the hell that is.
Don't worry, I don't either.
Okay, good. So Francine was not happy. She calls Don West pudgy, which made him laugh. Then she said that no one deserved to be in the ring with her, and none of them have done anything in wrestling. Hey, bitch, Daphne was the WCW Cruiserweight Champion. So there. Elektra with the, I don't even say line of the night, line of the last 10 minutes at this point. She says that Francine single handedly bankrupted ECW.
Woof.
I don't get that logic, but oh well. So we had a cat fight, and Elektra loses her top. Now, Elektra, who next week will be in a clothes ripping match, was embarrassed about having her shirt ripped off. Um, the segment ends with Francine promising to rip everyone's clothes off and becoming the first Miss TNA. This segment was so low rent, and even though I was and am fans of several of these women over the years, this did no one any favors, and I cannot imagine anyone buying next week's show to see this.
I was embarrassed, especially because they give it away for free on WWE TV, like quite often during this timeline. Like almost every 2-3 weeks during this time frame, you had Lita, Trish, Tori, and Stacy Keibler.
Mm-hmm.
And like every single one of them, like that was just the thing. They would just rip off their tops, each other's tops, and everything, and
And so
so they were
you
giving
would
away nothing new.
you would think, and I get again, it's Russo booking, but I get like you would think if you were trying to convince WWE fans or even lapsed WCW fans to check out your product, you want to give them something different. And if WWE is giving you clothes ripping and, paddle on a pole matches, you'd want to, maybe trot out some serious wrestling and see if that got over. Because, even if it didn't, it couldn't have been any worse than what we're going to see with basically every woman segment, until they get rid of it in a few months.
Yep.
So Goldilocks' backstage interviews Mortimer Plumtree, who is both a nerd and a manager. And he manages two men who used to be his tormentors but are now his servants, the Johnsons. I noted that I thought he had pretty good delivery.
It was odd. Like if I was to say that the promo that Ricky Steamboat cut was the best of the night, Plumtree was like it was something oddly dark and brooding about that promo. Like he was a spoiled rich kid who rose to prominence by being a spoiled rich kid.
And so he gets to get his revenge by, doing this, which is to take the Johnsons, which are two wrestlers. Now, we know that it's the Shane twins who would go on to fame as Gemini in WWE, but they're dressed in flesh colored bodysuits. And the implication is that they're dressed as giant penises. The problem is, they don't really look like it. In my opinion, if you were going to do it, you got to go all the way. Like, don't just half ass it, because in my opinion, that's what this is. I think it's they half assed the gimmick. If it's me, like, go all out. Like, if you're going to do something this stupid, don't half ass it. Go all out. Like, put a little white spot on the top of the head mask. Just like do something that's so painfully obvious. Because, like,
Put some balls on the boots.
yeah, the announcers don't actually say what it is.
That's what they need. They need to put like hairy balls on the boots. Like how the Iron Sheik would have on the toes, they would curl up.
Yep.
Put hairy ball, like one hairy ball on each boot.
See, that could have worked, but instead it's like the announcers wouldn't just say what the gimmick is. They would just say that, there was a lot of drama on the internet. There's controversy on the internet for this gimmick, but they didn't bother to tell you what that controversy was. And let it be known that their match, their first match here, was against the all-time legendary tag team, Cowboy James Storm and Psychosis.
And James Storm stood out.
Oh yeah. He he had the entire cowboy gimmick down, complete with the fake pistols. And yep, Don West, he puts over the match him and Ed saw a few weeks earlier. He doesn't go into specifics, but it was a match with him and Chris Harris that was so great that it got both of them jobs with TNA. And this was also the famous show where Jim Cornette confronted Ed Ferrara backstage over Ed Ferrara, being Ed Ferrara, basically.
This is true.
Yeah. So during this match, out wandered a blonde woman named Alicia, because we need more random blonde women on this show. And she, by the way, is the former Ryan Shamrock. She's wearing a business suit and just watching everything. The finish saw one of the Johnsons block a tornado DDT. Mortimer hooked James Storm's leg, which distracted him long enough for one of the Johnsons to hit a TKO for the win. I said a solid tag team match. However, let it be known that all four men in next week's X Division Championship main event lost, and spoiler alert, none of them get replaced. So tune in next week to see who the least loser of the losers are.
Ed was not impressed with the Shane twins, or as they're called here, the Johnsons.
And I gave it a rating of a 3.0.
Yeah, that's fine. 3.
So Slick Johnson, who was the referee, got confronted by Alicia, who demanded that he give her money. Slick just happened to have some money in his trousers and gave it to her. Now, I've never been a referee, and I don't know this for a fact. I know a few, so maybe I should ask them. Do referees tend to keep wads of cash in their pocket with them? You would think that if they did, it would fall out at some point. Are you there, Cyndi, or did I lose you?
Like, did this angle even go anywhere?
No. It goes for about a month or so, and then it just gets dropped.
Like, what I'm thinking is probably what happened was Alicia, which is, I think you said earlier, is the former Ryan Shamrock.
Yes.
I would have to assume that Alicia had a secret on Mark Slick Johnson, was going to get ready to tell NWA management so he wouldn't have a job anymore, so holding out for money, blackmail, all that fun stuff. I guess what might have happened was there would have been a match with Slick and Alicia, but I guess Alicia found out she wasn't going to get paid as much as she thought she was, and then bolted when the financial irregularities hit.
The financial irregularities. I like the way you say that. So we go to the back where Goldilocks.
Speaking of irregularities,
she runs into two people who are picking their nose, and they are the Dupps.
We have a promo with the Dupps.
The Dupps
are Trevor Murdoch.
Yep. Trevor Murdoch and the guy that took the cat from Jerry Lawler. So we're having multiple Jerry Lawler references on this show, by the way. And they'll continue, and not just from me. So they walk into the locker room where cousin Fluffed Up, who I wrote is Trevor's girlfriend, but he's actually the other one's girlfriend.
No, both.
Oh. See, I thought she was only one of their girlfriends.
Nope, both.
Okay. Well, they're all related and they're all having sex with each other. Actually, I don't know if Trevor's having sex with the guy who took the cat from Jerry Lawler or not. They do have names. That comes later. So Goldilocks just walked away and the interview ended, but that was after Bill Behrens came in and said there was no beer drinking in the locker room because Fluffed Up had a whole bunch of beer. Fluff then said the NWA was full of wussies. And like I said, like the opening segment, this just ended. And again, like, I don't know what the indie scene looked like in 2002. I mean, you can watch some of these Ring of Honor shows and see that there's a lot of talent out there, and TNA was not investing in a lot of it. But Anywho, I
Yeah,
can't
Low
imagine.
Key was one of those talents as well, and Low Key would become their champion.
Yeah,
I think Low Key, during the time when he was in TNA, would also be the Ring of Honor champion. He'd
I
be the
bel
first one.
I believe so because I think Low Key becomes champion in ROH in like a month, and I know he's in TNA for a while. But yeah. Now we've put down a lot of the talent that on this show so far, but there is a diamond in the rough coming up in the next segment, and by that I mean Sterling Marlin and Hermie Sadler.
This actually might be the segment of the night.
It might be, but so Jeremy Borash introduces Sterling Marlin and Hermie Sadler, and if you read Jerry Jarrett's book, this was one of the first angles he planned way back when TNA was just in the development stages. So if you love this angle or hate this angle, it's Jerry Jarrett because this was all his idea. But at the time, Sterling was the points leader in the Sprint Cup. He talked about how they have a race this weekend in California, and they are interrupted by K Crush, who is the future R-Truth and Ron Killings.
Shazam!
And despite this being 22 years ago, he still looks exactly the same.
Yep.
Like, it's not even funny. Like, he has to be like a vampire or something. But anyway, he's tired of hearing about NASCAR. And, well, he does live in
I need
Charlotte.
to edit what I said earlier. Remember how I said I thought Mortimer Plumtree had the second best promo of the night?
K Crush?
Yep.
Yep. He says that race car drivers are not athletes, and then keeps talking about his kind and their kind to the point where even the dumbest person in the crowd knew what he was talking about. And obviously, he was not talking about wrestlers and race car drivers. Hermie says that K Crush doesn't even look like an athlete, and how the great fans in Huntsville know the NASCAR drivers are athletes. So Crush took off his shirt and grips up Hermie Sadler when a man whose name will change 10,000 times back and forth between Brian Christopher and Brian Lawler runs in and attacks K Crush, much to the fans' delight. Hermie and Sterling then team up to throw Crush out of the ring. Lawler calls Crush a motherfucker and challenges him to a match, which Crush accepts. And that match is made for next week with the NASCAR guys in Brian's corner. And then security, showing how inept they are, they run out after the segment is over to restrain K Crush. Now, I will say that the crowd was far more into this than anything on the show so far. So I'll give them that. Any thoughts on this one? Oh, some of our fun little technical difficulties are popping up by saying, Cyndi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. What were your thoughts on that segment with K Crush and the NASCAR people?
I liked it. Yeah. The uncomfortable lines of your kind. Actually, what Brian Lawler said was kind of hilarious. Your kinds against my kind.
Yep. So we're gonna have a race war next week for only $9.99.
This would also kind of be K Crushes or Ron the Truth Killings um, gimmick for the next few months.
Pretty much, up until spoiler alert, up until he wins the title, pretty much. Because I mean, it was the whole thing on how he gets the title match to begin with.
I want to save that discussion for when we talk about that episode because it is something special.
Sounds good. So, speaking of things that are not very special, Jeff Jarrett was choking Jackie Fargo backstage. That is already more time talked about it than happened. It was 6 seconds long. And then we go to the ring for more not good as Stan and Bo Dupp. Stan is Trevor Murdoch, and Bo is the one that took the cat from Jerry Lawler, versus Christian York and Joey Matthews, the future Joey Mercury of M&M fame. This I said they did an all right job putting over the Dupps. Not sure I have any interest in actually watching them, but they do win here. Um, it was fine, we'll say. York hit the move that will eventually be known as Wasteland on Bo, but Stan broke it up. Matthews and Stan fall to the outside as York hit Bo with a tornado DDT. York goes up top, but Fluff crotches him and Bo picks up the win. I didn't even say what he picked up the win with. He just picked up the win. Fluff was out of position, and York had to stand on the top rope forever, waiting for said interference.
This match was all fluffed up.
In more ways than one.
I didn't like it.
And they're going to be around here for a while. There's some people on this show who are 1 and 2 week wonders, and there are some people who are 10-week wonders, which is around the time the money went to hell. And the Dupps are examples of 10-week wonders, you know. But hey, at least Trevor Murdoch, he eventually, broke out of the pack. We had more. Oh, by the way, I gave this match a 2.0 out of 10.
Yeah, with the Dupps, like, I know rednecks are a thing. Like, the early to mid 2000s was like the golden age of the redneck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have a stand-up who I believe is Trevor Murdoch. I'm gonna get them confused.
Yes, if you got them wrong, so did I, because I wrote that Stan is Trevor Murdoch.
Okay. He would continue to be a redneck all throughout his career until he got to the NWA, where he was just a wrestler.
He had to leave the NWA to go back to the NWA to become not a redneck.
Yeah.
But hey, he was also a country singer for like 5 seconds. And speaking of country singers,
killer version of Friends in Low Places, though.
Indeed. So I don't know if TNA left this on the YouTube app. I mean, I imagine they did. Okay. So we get a video package on Toby Keith, who, if you don't know somehow, he's a country music singer. And they show a video of some girl sitting in the empty stands of a football game while Toby stalks her. And then we go live, where Toby sings, courtesy of the red, white, and blue. I'm embarrassed to admit that 22 years later, I still know every word to this godforsaken song. Jeff Jarrett comes out. He shoves Toby out of the way to make his way to the ring for the main event. It was nice of Jeff to wait until the song was over to do this. And this led to a big to-do as the referees and security kept Toby from attacking Jeff. Jeff gets in the ring to demand the main event starts now. And again, the segment with the non-wrestlers is the most over part of the show.
Yep.
So you want to break down the technical expertise of Toby Keith singing?
A little pitchy. This was rushed. They didn't have the sound coming from the guitar ready, so it looked amateur. Like, you could tell during the performance he was fiddling with the cord, which would have went to the that would have went to the amplifier or the audio board. After he finished, that's when Jeff shoved him.
Yeah. So Jeff was nice enough to wait from the finish. That was nice of our top heel.
In 2002, this was a heel promo.
Oh, yeah.
If this promo would have happened 10 years later, Jeff Jarrett would be the most over face in the history of not only wrestling, but music.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I think it helps when you've seen everything else that's been on this show. If we weren't going to have Toby Keith singing, what the hell would we have had on the show? Because I guess that opener we could have given them 5 more minutes, but other than that, there's nothing else in this show that I've wanted to see more of. But with that in mind, it's main event time. It is the Gauntlet for the Gold. It's the Royal Rumble rules. 2 men start. Theoretically, every 90 seconds, a new participant enters. The last two men square off one-on-one for the NWA World Title. Number 1 is Jeff Jarrett. Number 2 is Buff Bagwell. Bagwell gets a fast start on Jarrett, hits the blockbuster, but gets dumped because instead of doing other shit, he poses instead. Lash LaRue is in at number 3. Jarrett gives him the stroke and tosses him. You will never see Lash again. Number 4 is Norman Smiley. They're ignoring their own clock, which is on the bottom of the screen, as there were still 22 seconds left when Borash introduces him. Smiley does the big wiggle and gets a very brief amount of offense before Jeff low blows him, hits a stroke, and dumps him. So after 4 people, Jeff Jarrett is the only person standing tall. And out of the other 3 people, I think we have a grand total of 2 future appearances by the 3 other people who have been in this match so far. Number 5 is Apollo. Some girl in the crowd screeches for him, but most fans have no idea who he is. He hits a low down and a series of clotheslines and lasts the entire 90 seconds. Number 6 is K-Crush, who goes right after Apollo, which gives Jarrett a breather. Number 7 is Slash, who's with Jim Mitchell, and they are members of the Disciples of the New Church. Slash used to be Wolfie D in PG-13, in case you're curious. And at this point, and I could be wrong, although I don't think I am, Apollo is our only babyfaces, and the only babyface in the ring so far, and the announcers debate on whether or not he knows English. Number 8 is a huge, jacked-up blonde guy who looks a lot like Scott Steiner, but he's not. His name is Del Rios, and Del Rios has a giant S on his ass, which, is because I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, he is Memphis, I don't want to say legend, but Memphis regular Spellbinder. I'm just going to assume I'm right, or Cyndi just may not be there anymore. This is a
No,
fun
I'm still here. I just had a phone call. All right. What happened?
So I'm up to Del Rios.
Anything? 99-cent store Scott Steiner.
Yes. I believe he is former Memphis regular Spellbinder, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, they quoted him from New York.
Oh, well, I was trying to figure out why he has a giant S on his ass, and that made sense to me, but maybe it's not.
No, he was clearly aping Scott Steiner. They said he was from New York. We've had a couple one and done so far in this match. Lash LaRue was a one and done. Buff Bagwell in ring.
No, Bagwell is back in 2 weeks.
Oh, my mistake then.
Yeah. Norman Smiley does at least one more match, but that's it.
No, he comes back.
Well, he comes back later on in like 2005, 2006. But I'm saying during this original run, he's 2 and done.
Right.
Number 9 is a future world champion, but it's not under the gimmick he comes out as. It's Justice. He would go on to become Abyss of all people, and maybe that's why Joseph Park couldn't find him in 2012, because he was really running around as Justice afterwards. He does hit 99-cent store Scott Steiner with a black hole slam. Number 10 is Conan, who grabs his junk on the way to the ring.
As he ought to do.
Yes. Mike Tenay, being the professor that he is, tells us that Jim Mitchell, he says that minister is one sinister looking individual.
And the Cosmic Ballet goes on.
Yes. Number 11 is not Joel Gertner, but, Joel Gertner came out first, and he introduced Bruce, who is one half of the Rainbow Express. He used to be Alan Funk and Queeby, and he is dating Lenny Lane because Lodi is injured. And when your boyfriend gets injured, you dump him for another wrestler. That's how it works, I guess.
It's the crazy mixed up world of professional wrestling.
Indeed. Number 12 is Rick Steiner. He dumps Slash and Justice. Number 13 is Malice.
It's the wall, brother!
It's the wall, brother. And he's also managed by Jim Mitchell, and he's getting the big push here as he eliminates Bruce, K-Crush, Del Rios, Conan, and Rick Steiner. So at this point, we're down to
What a
only.
motley crew that was.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'll give it to them for at least having the randoms in the ring for the big monster to come out and chuck everybody out. So at least there's that. There's at least a point to have some of these people in there longer than 10 seconds. So at this point, we're down to just Jarrett, Apollo, and Malice. Number 14 is Scott Hall. Apollo goes to the top rope and then has to jump down after 30 seconds because no one bothered to turn to him to let him do a what a maneuver to them. So up next is a classic, not a classic TNA fuck up, but perhaps the most seen suplex in wrestling history.
Yep.
The countdown clock goes to 0, and Toby Keith comes out. And I wrote down that Toby Keith is number 15. Toby Keith is not number 15, but we'll get to that in a minute. But he walks to the ring, he walks in, and he gives us vertical suplex to Jeff Jarrett. And TNA, which has done a shitty job in their history, 22 years, they've done a shitty job of putting over major moments in their history. This is one of like 2 things that they used to air over and over and over again. Toby Keith doing this suplex and the Elix Skipper cage walk hurricanrana. Like, those 2 things are the only 2 important things that ever happened in TNA, at least until Kurt Angle signed. But so Toby Keith and Scott Hall team up to toss Jarrett, and then Keith walks off without eliminating himself. And I thought that it screwed the clock up for a few. In fact, it did screw the clock up for a few minutes because Chris Harris comes out. It turns out he's the real number 15. And then Vampire Warrior comes out, and I thought he really jumped the clock, but no, he was just late coming in because they didn't. TNA being TNA, they didn't stop the fucking clock. It just kept going.
Yep.
It's like, dude, like, really? You have a production meeting for a reason. You know, Toby Keith did not shoot on Jeff Jarrett. And if he did, why did Chris Harris wait in the back?
Because Chris Harris was such a Toby Keith fanboy, like, hey, you do your thing. I'll wait until you're done.
Hey, maybe he was. I mean, it was Chris Harris after all.
And also, Toby Keith was like the biggest, like he was the biggest country star at the time. He was almost one of the biggest music star at the time.
Yeah.
And as you said about memorable TNA moments, this was the first memorable TNA moment, and they had it on the first show.
Yep. And Jared is going to be here forever because he owns the company. So if they're going to do something to get one of their guys publicity, you might as well do it with him. Although we'll get to the worst of Jeff Jarrett on these early shows in a few weeks because, man, oh man, it gets worse before it gets better for the Chosen One.
Oh, boy.
At least for his ego, anyway. Number 17 is Devin Storm, the former Crowbar. Personally, I would rather have heard his Gordon Soley impersonation, but that's just me. Malice kneels by the ropes to talk to Jim Mitchell, who apparently told him to go get chopped by Apollo and Scott Hall, because that's what he did. Number 19 is Steve Corino, who gets an ECW chant from 3.
No, 18.
What did I say, 17?
You said 19 for Steve Corino. He's actually 18.
Well, that was what I originally wrote when Toby Keith was 15, but Corino is 18. Malice almost got eliminated. Malice, who's 290, 300 pounds of a lot of muscle, a lot of girth, and little Jim Mitchell from the floor pushed him back in the ring. And who says wrestling was believable back in the day, too?
Exactly.
Number 19 is Ken Shamrock, and this is when I figured out what happened with Toby Keith, because I was writing who was left in the ring when the clock came back on, and we got number 20, who is Brian Christopher, who was Brian Lawler an hour ago. And like I said, we'll go back and forth between Christopher and Lawler for the next month. He actually gets a little bit of a push as he eliminates Chris Harris, Devin Storm, Vampire Warrior, and Steve Corino. Then Malice gives him a choke slam. Shamrock tosses Christopher. And then Malice backdrops Apollo, and Scott Hall out of the ring to leave us with our final two of Malice versus Ken Shamrock with Ricky Steamboat as referee for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Now, the Battle Royal was fine. I honestly, I thought it was a very well booked Battle Royal, all things considered. Because, they put over Jarrett, they put over Malice, and they put over Brian Christopher. And, those are theoretically three of your, next top guys. That doesn't work out for two of them, but it was nice in theory.
Right, and the other two, right, Jarrett was obvious. We knew he was going to become champion sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
As for Brian Lawler, we'll talk more about, and Malice, we'll talk more about them later.
So Malice and Shamrock, I really liked this one-on-one match between the two of them. And it was one of the few things on this show that I wanted to see more of. I wanted to see more Ken Shamrock versus Malice. And we do get some in a few weeks. But this was a fine little 6-7 minute match. Malice escapes an ankle lock and a cross arm breaker. He honestly, I say it's a pretty good match, but it was mostly Shamrock. The wall looked good. He did a few things, but this was more about Shamrock. He actually blocks a choke slam and he hits a belly to belly suplex for the pinfall win. And I say, I wrote they did a damn good job of trying to make Malice the new top guy, and then Shamrock looks like a world beater for beating this monster. And
yeah, absolutely, because during the end of the match, Shamrock tried to tap him out. But the thing was, James Mitchell had trained Malice to not tap out.
Yeah. And remember, it's 2002. Only pussies tap out.
Yep.
Like those UFC fighters who aren't real men, like, WWE wrestlers.
Like Ken Shamrock.
Yes. So Pyro goes off. Shamrock has finally won a world title in pro wrestling. And he's the very first champion in TNA history. He shakes hands with Steamboat, Harley Race, and Bill Behrens. And if the show ended there, it'd be like, great. Leaves you with a good feeling like, hey, the show was iffy. We end with a big babyface win. The babyface stands tall. And of course, we cannot have that because we go to the back where Jeff Jarrett is arguing with Toby Keith and Jackie Fargo. He storms out. Shamrock disappears. He's not important. The title isn't important. Jarrett says that it's his title. He punches Bullet Bob. Poor Bullet Bob.
He always, it's that Armstrong family. Yeah. Why everybody always picking on them?
Jackie Fargo and Toby Keith come out, but they're held back. Scott Hall comes out and he brawls with Jarrett as they announce that Hall versus Jarrett is your main event for next week.
Whoa. Scratch that. Reverse. Weren't we told earlier that the main event for next week was going to be a 4-way X Division match for the title?
I guess technically they don't say this is the main event and it's not the main event, but I mean, it's the only match with names that they announced. Because, I mean, as much as I love AJ Styles, Low Key, Jerry Lynn, and Psychosis, to most people, those aren't top names. Especially at the time. But anyway, by the way, I forgot to note, for as a whole, I gave the main event, the Battle Royal, and the title match afterwards a 5.5 out of 10. So easily the second best match of the night. Again, not that that's saying much considering, the middle part that we had. And I'm assuming Cindy's going to agree with me, so we'll move on here to finish out here.
Oh, no, hold on. Well, I liked it, but I didn't really love the main event. I would give it a 6. As a battle royal, it was good. That the one-on-one match I thought was fine, but I think it could have been a little bit better. So I'll give it a 6.
It's funny, I liked it more than you did, and you gave it a better rating than I did.
Oh well.
Oh well, it happens. But so that is the end of the first show. So to give an overall rating, so broke it down to three things. First of all, average match qualities. I took all my ratings, divided them by however many matches there were, and got a 3.7, which sounds about right considering
Yeah.
the the murderer's row we had in the middle. Then
Yeah,
we
I
have
think a 3 point. I think I'd like a 3.8 or a 3.6. But yeah, 3.7 sounds good.
then we have overall enjoyment because, like I say, like you know, just because a show has all good wrestling doesn't mean you overall enjoyed the show, and doesn't mean the show had overall bad wrestling, doesn't mean you didn't enjoy the show. But on a scale from 1 to 10, I gave it a 5.5 for just overall enjoyment. I said it's a decent show, not the blowaway show that it probably should have been, but there have been a lot worse first shows, notably the World Wrestling All Stars, ECW on TNN, ECW on Sci Fi. But overall, I mostly enjoyed the 2 hours that I spent watching it.
Eh, I didn't. Like, the opening promo was good. The 6 man was good. The main event was good. The promo between Truth and Hermie Sadler and Sterling Marlin and Brian Christopher was good. Everything else can die in a fire.
Uh, and then we have desire to pay for next week. Because remember, at the end of the day, they're asking you to not just pay $10 for this show, but pay $10 for next week's show. So, based on this show, how much of a desire on a scale from 1 to 10 do I have to pay for next week's show? And I gave it out of 10 a 4.5. There was just so much Jeff Jarrett on this show to the point of overkill. However, I was left wanting to see more X Division wrestling and wanting to see Ken Shamrock versus Malice as an actual individual match, even though the rest of the show was stuff I did not want to see.
I honestly would give it a 3.5. Like, I kind of want to. I want to see more of the 6 man. I kind of want to see where Shamrock goes, but I'm not gonna really pay $10 a week to on the potential of uh, not seeing the champion and not seeing some of the stars in that 6 man match.
So, so what you're saying is you don't want to pay $10 to see more Dupps or more Johnsons?
Not really, but I know something is worse coming.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, if you love TNA, and hey, I am certainly a TNA 2024 fan. Believe me, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better.
Yep.
But by the way, averaging those scores out, it gives me an overall score of a 4.57, so less than average.
Average score for me would be about a 3.5.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because like, okay, we can look at it
How do I
now
get
with,
into Ring of Honor?
we can look back at it and say, oh,
Do they have DVDs?
yeah.
Oh, they cost more?
But you were getting something different than WWE, and that's what TNA never did. You know,
No.
like no, even when they were at whatever you consider their peak, they were always just trying to be WWE, and it never made any sense why they wouldn't try to do their own thing. But that's a lot of why they're in the position they are, and other companies like AEW is where they are. Good, bad, or otherwise, the one thing you cannot say about AEW is that they're trying to be WWE.
Oh, the recent storyline with the Bucks.
Well, if it helps, I haven't watched AEW in like a month, so I'm gonna feign ignorance.
At least MJF is back.
Yes, MJF is back, and when you hear this in 3 weeks, you'll be like, "Duh, we know MJF's back." But to us, he came back last night, so not to
This
spoil
is the
things.
glory that we're reliving through all of Impact, all of the TNA stuff. Like, we taped weeks in advance.
And if you really want, you can hear the spoilers ahead of time by just, going to any of a number of websites and reading what happened on the show. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, that's going to do it for our first of 100 plus dives into TNA. So now that I've convinced you to do one show, will I be able to convince you to do week 2?
Yeah, why not?
You got to see where this goes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this show. I want to thank everybody for listening. Hope you all have a good week, and we'll talk to you again later on.